Good afternoon. Welcome to the Minnesota Senate Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee, February 18th, 2025. First bill on the docket today is Senate File 864. Welcome to the committee, Senator Putnam. Always a privilege to have you with us. Senate File 864 is in front of the committee, and I think you have an author's amendment, the A1.
I do, Mr. Chair.
Senator Wickland offers the A1 author's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? A1 is adopted. Senator Putnam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members, for attending to this important issue. This bill is complex, both practically and morally. So I'm glad that we have an opportunity to talk it through. As technology changes, our culture changes, and new opportunities and challenges arise. Today, we talk about one of those changes, the delivery of intoxicating beverages into one's private home. Something that was functionally inconceivable only 10 years ago is now fairly common. Today, we have a responsibility to have a grown-up conversation about the world in which we actually live, a world in which alcohol can be delivered into your home. That's different. We know that a bartender can be held liable for overserving a customer. We know that a retail establishment can't sell alcohol to someone who is obviously inebriated. We don't simply say, hey, Applebee's bartender, we trust you to do the right thing. That's not the real world we live in. The state has already been responsible and made rules. This bill fulfills that responsibility and the need for consistency with the way that things have been. Mr. Chair, to the bill itself, the legislation creates a third-party delivery of off-sale liquor license. It requires third-party delivery licensees, employees, or contractors to be 21 years old, to verify the age of anyone to whom they deliver alcohol, and to have undergone a training that would help them diagnose signs of impairment. It also requires that a third-party liquor delivery license obtain liability insurance. Mr. Chair and members, recently the communication with the Attorney General made clear that folks who are delivering alcohol are functionally the retailers who have sold that product. DoorDash, for example, will charge you more because the fee is part of the cost of the alcohol. The receipt that you get is to DoorDash, Instacart, Uber Eats. It's not to Total Wine. So they are, in effect, the retailers of these substances, but they do not have a license currently. So the question that we have now is not the advisability of getting a license or not. It's if we're going to be consistent, we have to figure out what kind. So members, we will hear that these delivery services have their own protocols that ensure the well-being of their customers. I've had many conversations with stakeholders, and I know that their hearts are in the right place. They mean well, and they have their own protocols. But some of them have failed. They failed Jackie. So today, let's hear her story from her mother. Mr. Chair, if we can, my testifier is here to talk.
Thank you, Senator Putnam, and thank you so much for bringing Ms. Manuel to the committee. Ms. Manuel, please introduce yourself for the record and then proceed.
Hello, my name is Wendy Manuel. I live in Northfield, Minnesota, and I've been a Minnesota resident since 2016. I'm here today because my daughter, Jacqueline, died in September of 2022, and she died from alcohol poisoning and intoxication. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got to this place today. But I also want to tell you a tiny bit about myself. I had a 27-year career in high tech. I worked for Dell and for Apple. And before that, I worked for Chamber of Commerce's. And then after the tech career, I quit all that. And I have 2 master's degrees, one in public health and a master's of divinity. And I was a hospice and a hospital chaplain before I retired. So my daughter struggled off and on in her adult years. Let me tell you, it's very hard to be a parent of an adult child. Maybe some of you know that already. But anyhow, she struggled. She went to rehab twice. Her last rehab was in 2022 in the spring. And after that rehab, and she had moved to an apartment in downtown Minneapolis. After that rehab, she put up a boundary wall, and this is something alcoholics do. They isolate themselves. And she forbid me to come see her, and she forbid friends and other family members. So it was kind of hard to know what was going on all the time. She was, what I discovered later, I had called one wellness check on her, and by the way, even though I told them that the door was unlocked, her apartment door, they could not enter. They could hear she was in there, but if she didn't specifically give permission, they're not allowed to go in. My daughter, I finally went and got her and called an ambulance Labor Day that weekend, and she died 17 days later. And also, while she was on the couch, she was on a couch and saying she was very weak and could not walk. And I said, well, how are you going to the bathroom? And she says, well, I have Depends or diapers. So I knew that things were bad. And when she died, her father found in her apartment, clearly to see, 70 empty bottles. And then when we cleaned up her apartment later, we found a lot more. So there was a lot. After some months of my grief, I remembered that she said she got things delivered and that she left her door unlocked so they could bring it inside. And I remembered that she used Instacart, and I had her phone. And so I thought, oh, I'm gonna look that up. And I looked into her Instacart app and was able to make spreadsheets of all the deliveries from 2020 till the end. I did research on who the delivery people were. I could see their names. They were only one person delivered to her more than once. There were multiple delivery people. And I also did research on the math about of the alcohol she bought, how many servings was she taking. And she ordered in the beginning, maybe every week or every other week. But in that last summer, there were times when she had orders one day apart. And for example, in one of those examples, what she ordered would have been the equivalent in that one day of 23 servings of alcohol. And the recommended amount of alcohol for a woman is 1 serving a day. So this is clearly a problem. On top of that, she gave written instructions on her orders that they had to come into her apartment because she would be unable to answer the door because she had a disability. She didn't say what that was, but the truth was she couldn't walk anymore. And so I started thinking this just doesn't feel right, and I researched Minnesota law. And the law on the books that I found was no person may sell, give, furnish, or any way procure for another alcoholic beverages for the use of an obviously intoxicated person. And we could probably debate that term, obviously intoxicated, but it's clear that the intent of this law that's on the books was to protect people from the harm of alcohol. Maybe, somebody, if she could have walked, she could have gotten up and driven somewhere. So the law had a reason, but it doesn't clarify anything about delivery. It has all these other verbs, but not that. And I thought, this feels like a gap to me. And this is when after I did all this research, I contacted Senator Putnam. Obviously intoxicated, when you research that, we all kind of know somebody's stumbling or slurring their speech and things like that. But I don't think anybody would have seen that in Jacqueline. She was a very smart woman. She had a PhD. She taught at U of M and McAllister and Augsburg. She was accomplished in other things, such as equestrian riding. She was very funny as well. and she cared a lot about people. But if somebody came into her apartment and she was on that couch, like I did that time I finally went, she said, "Hi, Mom, why are you here?" She was articulate still, but she could not walk. And ataxia, or peripheral neuropathy, is a result of alcoholism and alcohol poisoning. I know that Uber Eats has a pretty good policy from what I've read. And I know that DoorDash, that they have training about what is obvious intoxication. But I don't know how far that really goes, because hers isn't obvious in the common way we think of it. And then I found myself asking, who is accountable for this if something really did happen? Not only her death, but what if somebody drives a car and causes an accident? Who's accountable? Is it the liquor retailer? Is it the delivery company? Or is it the person delivering it? Because it's not clear. And so my goal is that, and my hope is that there will be clarity in the law, which is what I think this proposed law does, this bill. And it supports the part of the liquor law that already exists, that we don't want to deliver alcohol or provide it in any way to somebody who is obviously intoxicated. So I really hope that you will seriously consider this and let it go to the floor, or whatever the next step is, for further debate and consideration. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Manuel. We'll go now to member questions or comments. Any members of the Commerce Committee have concerns or questions? I'll just say a couple. Your story is very compelling. Obviously, this is an area that the Commerce Committee needs to be aware of. This is a new marketing phenomenon, alcohol delivered directly to homes. You're correct that the Minnesota standard is that establishments are responsible for the liquor that they serve to impaired customers, and this is a new area of the marketplace that is unaddressed in Minnesota law. The bill that's before us today, I think, needs work with industry, and Senator Putnam has initiated that process. We're going to lay the bill over while that work continues, but you have certainly raised an issue relevant and important to this committee. So thank you for your testimony today.
Thank
Senator
you.
Putnam, Senator Rest.
Thank you. Senator Putnam, I don't understand the sequence in your bill. What has to happen and by whom to get to the result that Ms. Manuel would have wanted for her daughter? So how does, if we pass this, and I understand when you know it, Mr. Chairman, but so if we pass this, what would have been the different result? Or not?
Senator.
With this bill passed, could there still be people with all good intentions of obeying the law still result in the death of Ms. Manuel's daughter?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Rest, for the question. I think it's a really important question. And to me, I see a couple things that could be helpful. I mean, one thing that's important to realize is Maryland just passed a law that was very similar to this, and other states are thinking about doing very similar things. And to me, what the real accomplishment here, and obviously we can't go back and save Jacqueline, but one of the things that this would do is create a sense of consistency across different platforms that are engaged in this work. So in my conversations with Uber Eats, interestingly enough, has their own alcohol delivery program because they purchased another company that was exclusively about alcohol delivery. So Uber Eats purchased Drizzly. Drizzly was designed to facilitate the delivery of alcohol. So they'd already done a bunch of work on that. DoorDash, in contrast, just sort of still operate with a food delivery model that includes alcohol. Instacart, as far as we can tell, are doing whatever they want. So some consistency across these different delivery platforms, I think, would be one thing that would be very helpful. But there's also the sense of consequences. there's a realization that these industries had better be better at checking these kinds of things because there would be consequences to their bad acting. So it doesn't necessarily automatically stop the delivery of alcohol to someone who is inebriated or who is in danger. But it does, I think, create a framework to put some more consistency and some legal ramifications around something that's already happening and that's new.
Thank you. So again, this law is in place, and we can't go for any other person who has alcohol, a seriously impaired alcoholic. If this law is in place, would someone be able to respond to a phone call, a company, and deliver alcohol products to the incapacitated person, and if they died, what happens?
I can take a stab at that, Senator Putnam. The one thing that I would note, Senator Rest, is that that delivery service would have a license, which could then be revoked by the state of Minnesota if they were deemed to have performed irresponsibly. Is that correct, Senator Putnam?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. One other thing I would add to that as well, Senator Rest, if I may, Mr. Chair, is that some of the platforms we've been talking to already are actually fairly supportive of this because they will make their own training programs much more vigorous. So, for example, DoorDash has sent me a version of the bill with some changes that they'd like to make. And one of the changes they'd like to make is to be much more explicit about the nature of the training that everyone who delivers alcohol has to take. So clearly, as Ms. Manuel mentioned, it's hard to tell if a sort of clinical alcoholic is truly inebriated. But if people were a little bit better trained at finding those things, maybe we'd have a better chance of making sure that that's not the case.
May I add?
Sure.
May I add something? One difference is right now, the drivers do have some discretion to not deliver. But this would make that discretion more concrete. In other words, I don't know the extent of their current training. I did happen to see Instacart's training. You can see it on YouTube. But if they, for example, right now, this is, whose is this? I don't know. Oh, Uber Eats, they say be sure to look for these signs: slow reactions and poor coordination, difficulty walking straight, trouble handing their ID, or slurred words like I'm doing right now. Anyway, the point is, that's kind of what we all think obvious intoxication is. But my point is, it can be more than that and more subtle. So a more robust training and the fact that their license could be at risk could probably have prevented some of these deliveries to my daughter.
Senator Reston, turn your microphone on if you.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I support the end result that someone other than the person ordering the delivery of alcohol is going to be responsible. I mean, that's part of it. And so to that end, people will have to have a license. I'm just trying to get this process. A license under one of these two categories, and this third-party delivery service in particular is going to have to pay $500 for that license. And is that a one-time fee, or is that an annual fee?
Mr. Chair, Madam
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, it's an annual fee.
An annual
Rest.
fee. And does $500 represent the cost of administering that license as a fee? I mean, a fee, otherwise it's a tax. So is that what would that be the Department of Commerce?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, that's my understanding.
Okay, and so they estimate that the fiscal note for doing this would come up with, yeah, it's going to cost $500 to, of all the details and all the administrative costs and so on an annual basis to do this. And to me, Mr. Chairman and Senator Putnam, the answer is yes, that's what it's going to cost. Not more and not less. And then the employees, the drivers, they have to have some special training to be able to use their discretion when a delivery is inappropriate, and they can just turn around and walk away without doing the delivery, and they will be made whole. They have not violated a person's right to order things by doing that. And just like in a liquor store, you have to be 21 to sell liquor. Here, you have to be 21 in order to deliver it. I really am trying to understand your bill. And then the company that is the delivery, is the delivery company, one of those that you just mentioned, they have to have the same kind of liability insurance that the owner of a bar has. And dram shop, that's what this is. Is that it?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, yes, that is my
Okay,
understanding of how that
thank
works.
you.
But I would, if I may.
It's much clearer now to me.
Thank you. I would, Mr. Chair, Senator Rest, this is something that we are still working on. This is not the final
I see.
vision.
Okay.
But part of the reason why there is a challenge in working through the bill is because there is so much diversity and different approaches to this among the different services. So, for example, DoorDash has a policy wherein if you were to take alcohol to deliver to someone, notice that they are intoxicated, you are still compensated as a dasher if you turn around and leave. But that's DoorDash. That's not all of them. So say you were delivering alcohol to Senator Howe, and you showed up at his house, and you could tell that he had a little bit too much. You could still turn around and still get paid as if you made that delivery. But that's DoorDash. That's not all of these other different companies. So consistency is one of the things that we're working toward. Sure. Because this is a brand new way of having a substance delivered into your house that could be dangerous. We're trying to aim for some degree of consistency or reliability.
Yeah, and I would
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It helps me very much.
Yeah, and for the record, first of all, you've clearly pointed out, both Senator Rest and you have pointed out why, this is a complex area, and I appreciate you sort of dipping your toe in the water to get the process started. Also, this bill pertains to Chapter 348, which is the Department of Public Safety. So you had mentioned the Commissioner of Commerce. I think it would actually be the Commissioner of Public
I see.
Safety. So.
Thank you.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Putnam, and my condolences to your daughter's tragic death, Ms. Manuel. Mr. Chair and Senator Putnam, my question goes, and it's not really a question. I just, my concerns is if you're, I think an area where you need to continue to work on and look at is if I belong to a Wine of the Month club that comes out of California and the UPS driver delivers me a case of wine, how does that fit into this? Because I'm not quite sure how that works with that and how the training, and so that's just something that pops into my head that says that that's something that you're going to have to work on that I'm not quite sure how it works, and thank you.
Senator Dames.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if thank you very much for that question, and I appreciate your acknowledgement of the complexity of the situation, Senator Howe. My understanding is that there might be some different issues with interstate shipping with things like that, but it is a really important consideration to think about other modes of delivery to get at the problem we're looking for. So I appreciate that suggestion, Senator Howe.
Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Putnam. Would this This license, do we currently have a license at this point just for alcohol delivery?
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, we do not, is my
Senator
understanding.
Dames.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Dames.
Senator Putnam, so we would be creating a new license, is that correct?
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, yes, I believe so.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Senator Dames.
And I might have missed this, but did you say that they would need dram shop insurance?
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, yes, there would need to be some insurance. It's the last line of the bill, I believe.
Senator
So,
Dames.
well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Follow-up, so what's going to stop this from advancing to be a traveling liquor store? In other words, you've got a license to deliver, and you have dram shop insurance, it's not going to take much to make that next step. And I'm just curious what safeguards are going to be so we don't see that happening.
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, if you don't mind, could I ask you a question of clarification, Senator Dames, in that what would be the distinction that you see between a traveling liquor store and what's currently happening with delivery of alcohol into people's homes? That would be part of the question. The other part is that this is specific to third-party delivery license, so it is exclusively for delivery. But I'm sensing that you see a possibility of delivery companies that are delivery companies somehow behaving like stores, which I would suggest they kind of probably are a little bit. But clearly, you see a different distinction. So I'm asking you what would that look like to you, if you don't mind me asking you that question, Senator Dames?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dames.
And Senator Putnam, the dram shop, if they have, I'm trying to tie the dram shop insurance into the delivery process. So there's more to just delivering this. There's something else in here if you're gonna have dram shop insurance. And if you're gonna have dram shop insurance, it doesn't take much to move to the next step. And so I'm just curious, what is the concern that they need dram shop insurance? Are we gonna, what's the accountability process in delivering this alcohol?
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, in all candor, I'm not fully familiar with the word dram shop and to what that refers, but we do need some degree of liquor liability insurance is the language that's there, and there's a statutory reference. Is that the same thing as dram shop insurance?
Mr. Chair?
Senator Dames.
Dram shop insurance is insurance that protects the liquor store that's selling or serving alcohol if they've served somebody that, and well, it can be for many things, but in many cases, it's a challenge that they serve somebody they shouldn't have served. And so I'm wondering what the connection is. So if I get a case of wine, as Senator House said, from California, and I'm not home, and they let it at the doorstep, and then I take that alcohol and drink that and do something, who's going to be responsible? Is that going to come under, is that what you want the insurance for?
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, this is about creating some kind of degree of responsibility or accountability to the person who supplies alcohol to another person. That's the fundamental core of the issue here. And part of the challenge is that this is a brand new kind of economic model. We haven't had people delivering these kind of substances that could be potentially dangerous into people's homes in the past. So as I mentioned earlier, the Attorney General recently mentioned, not the Attorney General himself, but there was a statement that the individual who supplies the alcohol in these delivery services is functionally a retailer of alcohol because the receipt goes to Instacart, DoorDash, Uber Eats. It doesn't go to Total Wine. So in a sense, they kind of already are acting as liquor retailers, but in a different sense of retail. So I'm not sure if that adequately answers your question, Senator Dames, but I'm trying.
We could talk about it offline, Senator Putnam. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions or comments from the committee? Closing comments from the author or the witness.
Well, I want to first thank Ms. Manuel for having the courage to come here and tell her story. I can't imagine that it's easy. And I also know that she's not the only one who has a story like this to tell. So I very much appreciate you, Mr. Chair, for giving us this opportunity to have this discussion and your patience and knowledge that we're dealing with something that's new and complicated, but is morally imperative. So again, I thank you all for your questions and your considerations and your suggestions. And we're going to work on this until we get it right. And we have to get it right for the people of Minnesota. So thank you again very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Putnam. Senate File 864, as amended, is laid over. Senate File 1215 is before the committee. Welcome to the committee, Senator Duckworth. Senate File 1215 is in front of us. I think you have a few amendments.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm going to move a couple of, or three authors' amendments, if that's okay. The first one is the A1.
Senator Duckworth offers the A1 as an author's amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? A1 is adopted. Usually you get one freebie, so I'll have you explain the other two that you have.
Well, I'm happy to, since they came from you, Mr. Chair. So the First Amendment, I'll describe in a little bit, but these next two are kind of aimed at the same thing. It removes the word flavored from the bill, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail once we're hopefully able to get these adopted as well, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to offer the A2.
Is that the right order? Yes. Okay. Senator Duckworth offers the A2. Any questions or discussions being distributed? Removes the word flavored. All in favor of the A2?
Mr.
Say,
Chairman?
oh, we'll wait.
Yeah, I don't have it. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any questions or discussion now that the amendment is distributed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? A2 is adopted. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then just to get the last bit of the word flavored out of the bill, I'd like to offer the A3.
Senator Duckworth offers the A3. It will be distributed. I'll wait for it to be distributed. Deletes the word flavored from the A1 that we just adopted.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions or discussion on the A3? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? A3 is adopted. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, first for the opportunity to present this bill. I do greatly appreciate it. And second, for your feedback last evening when you had a chance to take a peek at the bill and offer some, I think, very good and suggestions in good faith, and hence the additional amendments as well. Members, the bill before you would ban nitrous oxide from being sold by retailers to consumers. And the reason why the bill is before us is we've seen a trend across the country, to include here in Minnesota, where folks are, especially young people, purchasing canisters of nitrous oxide and using it in a way that it's not intended, in a way that harms them, and in some instances in a way that has led to folks dying. The reason why the A1 amendment was offered is because there are some legitimate uses for this substance, whether it be in a dental office, for an automotive shop, or for some culinary reasons. We're attempting to prohibit the sale of something that people are using to harm themselves, but also find the medium ground that allows for it to be used for legitimate purposes as well. And I'll admit that the bill is very much open to suggestion and additional feedback from stakeholders if they see other ways to improve upon it as well. Chair Klein said, hey, if we're looking at a harmful substance here, whether it's flavored or not, maybe we should make it difficult for folks to purchase if they're going to use it to harm themselves. And I agree, hence amendments 2 and 3. So that's the gist of the bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take feedback or suggestions regarding the bill. It's going to be laid over, and ultimately we'll see where we end up regarding the bill. But if it needs some improvements or there's some great suggestions out there, certainly open to incorporating them into the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Yeah, before this bill came to the committee, I had read the article in the Atlantic, which I recommend to every member of the committee, just came out a couple weeks ago, talking about how these intoxicating substances are kind of unregulated and available at every corner store. And the word flavored actually came from my 21-year-old son, who said, "My friends will just go buy unflavored stuff, which circumvents your law." And
I
so-
should have had him come testify.
In any case, those are the comments from the chair. But serious issue, thank you for bringing it forward. Any questions or comments from the committee? Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Duckworth. So the A2 and the A3 amendments are,
microphone on?
for the most part, responding to Senator Klein's son. Thank him for that, I guess. But the A1 amendment still has the word flavored in there. So I'm trying to understand what, and maybe would request of council to provide us with an unofficial engrossment that reflects how you really want the bill to be considered going forward. But, so is, on line 1.3 of the A1, is the word flavored still there?
Ms. Severson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. The A3 is an amendment to the amendment.
I see, I see now. I thought it was going back to the other.
They were trying to make sure I didn't get in too much trouble with you, Senator Rest. They helped me out with that.
I'm sorry, what?
So they wanted to make sure I didn't get in trouble with you, so they fixed it for me
Yes.
ahead of time.
Further
Okay.
questions from the committee?
That's it, thank you.
Any closing comments, Senator Duckworth?
No, Mr. Chair, I appreciate your additional context, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present the bill. Thank you.
Senate File 1215 as amended is laid over. We are adjourned.